Couple of words on the vaccine, my heading number one. Well, of course, it's not one vaccine. There are well over 150 vaccine candidates currently being seriously tested. There are 10 in the middle of phase 3 trials and some about to go into phase 3 trials. And I remind everybody that there are, when you've got a good-looking vaccine that's done well in the early workup, there are always 3 stages. Stage 1 is you find a load of volunteers and you give them the vaccine. And obviously, if those volunteers don't do well, then that's it, that's the end. But if the volunteers do fine with the vaccine, then you go to the next phase, phase 2, when you find a population and you vaccinate them and you see whether they are protected and also whether they manage to have the vaccine without side effects. And if that works, then you go to multiple populations in many settings, what's called phase 3. And that's always when the exciting joy happens or despair. And what we've heard is that 3 vaccines are going nicely through their phase 3 trials and are really showing remarkable effectiveness. 2 of those are experimental vaccines that are being made using genetic code rather than inactivated cells. The genetic code is from ribonucleic acid, which is the genetic code that's in the virus. So these are RNA vaccines. And the theory is that these will be incredibly effective vaccines with high levels of effectiveness. And it's also expected that they will have very, very low side effects because you're making the vaccine just with the genetic code, not with any other material from the virus. And the disadvantage is that most of these RNA vaccines have to be kept super cold. And I don't know why, but it's always been the case. And so when Pfizer, together with a Hungarian-based biotech firm, produced their vaccine, they got 95% efficacy on early analysis of results, not even completely going through their phase 3. They haven't done their safety part yet, but because it's so effective, they decided to go public about it about 10 days ago. There are issues with the Pfizer vaccine, but the main one is that it just needs to be kept super cold, minus 60 degrees centigrade, minus 90 something Fahrenheit. And we've had one of these super cold vaccines before, the vaccine that was developed for Ebola in 2015. And they're really rather difficult to deal with when you're trying to use them for large populations. We used the experimental vaccine to do a technique for containing Ebola called ring vaccination, where you vaccinate around an index case to try to stop the disease spreading. And gosh, it was effective. And it really aided the last part of Ebola containment in, first of all, Sierra Leone and then Guinea in 2015. And so this Pfizer vaccine, the one that was talked about 10 days ago, 95% efficacy at preventing severe disease. And secondly, extreme cold needed, safety work still to be done. But that was the one that pushed Pfizer's share value up massively and got the first bubble of excitement going that perhaps there would be an approach to really dealing with the pandemic through vaccine. And some very well-known global figures like the Regius Professor of Medicine in Oxford, a fellow called John Bell, came out very, very pleased about this vaccine. Tony Fauci of the US was very excited about how effective it is. And I think, you know, we have to remember that influenza vaccines are only about 65 or 70% effective usually. So to have one that's 95% effective, which means that basically if you're vaccinated, you have 95% less chance of getting severe disease when you're exposed than if you're not vaccinated. This is brilliant news. So the Pfizer vaccine comes along and everybody starts getting excited. Of course, in Britain, where they've bought it, they've done an advance purchase order for some doses of the Pfizer vaccine. I don't think it's a huge number. They're also talking to the general practitioners, and I know this from my sister, who's a GP in Essex. She says they're actually receiving directives to organize to give people this super cold vaccine. They're asked to focus on the most at-risk communities first. So in my sister's practice area, they have 4 residential care homes for older people, all of which have been constantly troubled by COVID. So the idea is to vaccinate people in and around these residential care homes. Also, obviously, healthcare workers will be offered the vaccine early. And I said to my sister, well, what about the logistics of a super cold vaccine? She said, we'll manage. We'll find ways. We'll have fridges in the car where we can take it out of the deep freeze, the -60, with its liquid nitrogen, and we'll be able to take it around during the day and use it, and we'll be able to use it without it going off. She's completely, totally keen on it. She says it's wonderful news. They've very heavy COVID burden in their practice right now. A lot of practice staff off, and she says this is just a godsend. So, you know, you can feel just from not just her, but from quite a lot of practitioners, a sense of real excitement that there is a vaccine, even though it needs to be kept cold, even though there won't be many doses at the beginning. And then fast forward, we get the results from another experimental RNA vaccine. This one, Moderna, a company based just in the outskirts of Boston, set up by brilliant cell biologists. And I remember, just because I happen to know one of the people in Moderna, him telling me that this RNA vaccine technique is just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful approach to vaccine development. So nice and targeted. The biologists are really excited about it. And Moderna vaccine, it turns out, is actually not needing to be kept so cold. Kat is just writing to me saying -20 degrees. She's super interested in these vaccines, is Catherine. And the other thing about Moderna is they've been quite clever. They're doing advanced sales to different places, and they're offering basically in return for an investment of several million, they are setting up lines to produce Moderna vaccine in different parts of the world that will then be able to certainly produce quite a lot of millions of doses a year. So that one is rolling out. And then the Russian vaccine, which is using a different technology. I think it's inactivated virus rather than ribonucleic acid. It's called Sputnik. And they say they've got 93% protective efficacy, which is great. Now, then there's a 4th vaccine candidate made by AstraZeneca and Oxford University that uses also inactivated cells, and that seems to be doing quite well too. That's now come through its phase 2 trials, is about to go into phase 3. But there's a lot of good vibes about that one because it can be kept in the fridge, and it's a lot cheaper than the RNA vaccines. So that's 4 coming along. Now, the other thing that I hear a lot about these vaccines is that they're going to need to be given in 2 doses. There's some question mark about how long the protection will last, but we're used to that. With flu, we have to give a new vaccine each year, partly because of strain changes, but also because there is a diminution in immune response. These COVID vaccines are very interesting. They're all being manufactured to attack what's called the spike, which is that if you remember pictures of coronavirus, it's got spikes that stick out. And it's the spike protein that is the target for vaccines. This is useful because if the rest of the virus mutates, it's usually the spike protein, the protein that's on the spike, which is important when it attaches to body cells. That's the target. And so other mutations in the virus won't matter too much as long as you're going for the spike protein, because that's what causes the disease. So I talked to Bruce Aylward, who runs the thing called COVAX, which is the global vaccine purchase program that many countries have bought into as a way of trying to ensure that they can access vaccine at a reasonable price and to hedge so that if one or other of the vaccine candidates doesn't work, they still have a chance to get one. So Bruce has got this beautiful creation going. 180 countries have bought into COVAX in various degrees. And it's quite promising. It's still a bit short of cash. It's got 5 billion. They need quite a lot more billion. And I said to him, so more vaccines will come on board. We expect several of them to get emergency use authorization early next year. We expect production to increase during next year. I said, how long? How long before we can expect the world to be vaccinated? And his answer straight away, I basically, the way I worked it, because I didn't want to make him feel that he had to make the prediction. So I said, it's my view that it will take well into 2021, perhaps into 2022, just because the logistics of enabling everybody to be immunized are going to be so difficult. And there'll be some people who move quickly to be immunized. There are others who will wait because they're just unsure. Vaccine hesitancy is what it is. You hesitate before accepting. And he believes it will be 2022. And I believe it will be 2022 before we can start to think of a world where this virus is no longer an irritating threat. So that's quite a long time. So 24 months, say, of COVID world, 24 months of being able to deal with it. And we've got a long way to go. It's not just going to be a mild problem that we will just have to add to the other problems. If we look at what's happening around the world, the exponential spread of the virus is creating these two big problems. One is high levels of sickness and death, particularly among older people or people with concomitant disease. And secondly, as we discussed last time, this very debilitating long COVID. And the more I hear about it, the more I realize it's just a massive problem with 1 in 20 or 1 in 25 people affected by it. So we are going to have to continue working for COVID readiness in COVID world for the foreseeable future. Now, in the last session that we did, some of you will remember that John described what we call the 7 steps program for actually in different places getting COVID ready. And our colleague Julian Delamonte is actually in, he's part of the governance of a commune near here, Les Carrozes, which includes a quite well-known French ski resort called Flaine that some of you might have been at. And what Julian has been doing is working with the people running Flaine ski resort and the community to prepare for a ski season amidst COVID. He's been applying in his own way some of the ideas in our 7-step, particularly this idea of getting the people at the center of response, ensuring there's trust in the community, and creating a kind of honeycomb structure of people in the community who are connected to each other, who become the new social fabric. Well, of course, given that this is quite an active ski resort area, the social fabric is quite strong anyway. But I wanted to ask Julian to share with you some of the things that he's been doing. Julian, would you like to just come in now?
Good morning to all. I hope you're well. Just to begin, I want to express to Thuy my sympathy, because even as Frenchman, I feel daily shock when seeing the French way of managing COVID. So don't be surprised. Just to give you a bit of background, I live in a 2,000 inhabitants village, which is turning into 30,000 tourists ski resorts during the winter. So all our economy and our society is organized around ski activity, and it's a bit tricky to prepare COVID management things because we are not at the same scale during the preparation phase and we hope the season phase. So I would say that the easy way would be to do what I've just done, which is complaining about the fact that central government is doing nothing and blah, 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 which is a very French way of reacting. But we decided to go another way and to be extremely active and proactive. So we said, okay, we don't know everything. We are facing controversies and we are not experts in our little shoes of local authorities, but let's try. So we launched the local movement by organizing OOB, following David's example, to try to focus all the energies around COVID management. And I can say that the reaction are extremely positive because the fact of acting and the fact of seeing that the municipality is acting is extremely reassuring for people in spite of the very anxious context. And we did mainly two things. First are focused on technical measures, I would say. So it's about organizing extra capabilities of testing, antigen testings. So in spite of all controversies, local doctors saying it's not reliable, central government saying you should do that, WHO advising strongly to do so, we decided to do. And we launched a call for all the people who are skilled in terms of medical capabilities to become extra testers during the winter season, because as I said, we are not numerous enough to do that with the regular doctors. And the second technical measure would be about planning the quarantine accommodation capabilities. And here again, the municipality can't do everything by itself because we don't have enough public buildings. So we are working with hotel owners and residence owners to find capabilities and to work on the ways we can secure them to welcome potential COVID positive tested persons. And the second type of measures is I would say, more about creating positive interactions in this very anxious time. So what we do is that the municipality is providing all the means to organize video conferences and capabilities to all citizens, associations, and actors who want to provide, I would say, occasion of meeting. So it can take very different forms. For example, we have a UK citizen who proposed to organize the English conversations, which is extremely challenging in French context. So thank you very much to her. We have associations that propose to share, for example, the Gardening Association proposed to share tips about what you can do during the winter to prepare your garden for the next spring. We have also the local library who is sharing on a regular basis views on the last books they loved. I mean, all these things are little things, but I can testify that organizing them on a regular basis and creating regular positive interactions has a huge impact on local moods. And we hope that it will contribute to go through all that in the best possible way. And I would be extremely interested if you have some tips, ideas, or good practice that you witness in your environments and that we can use here.
Thank you very much indeed, Julien. It was Julien saying he wants some tips and would like to talk that made me convinced that it would be great for him to discuss it. And I mean, not everybody has the opportunity to go skiing and visit ski resorts, so not everybody will be familiar with that style of life. But just to emphasize, their commune moves from 2,000 to 30,000 from the summer population to the winter population, and this combination of technical measures so that they can manage the threat of COVID plus the positive interactions, I found fascinating. I'd be really pleased to hear other examples of practical actions being taken to build this honeycomb of connections, plus at the same time extending the normal health capabilities so it's got much wider reach, as Julian described with the testing. So don't hesitate to catch attention. I need to know whether or not you would like to get to raise your idea. And we've got some comments coming on the vaccine question. Don't worry, we'll pick those up as well. The third direction that I want to open up, perhaps not just for today, but going ahead, is thoughts about more general looking ahead on what we can all do to contribute to what I'm calling COVID world, what we can do to contribute to the thinking and action that will be necessary in all communities to actually not just find ways of coping with the virus to get on, but actually thinking very positively about living with the virus in our midst and reorganizing our lives. It's a bit similar to what Julian is doing, but it's being prepared to think about mindset as well as skill set. And if any of you want to do that and talk about that, that would be great. I mean, obviously, this is not a time so much for thinking about how we are sorting out our own well-being. That we can do another time, but I'm really interested in things that we can offer to others as ways of acting and then thinking and behaving. And this is not least because I'm still getting together with my colleagues plenty of opportunity to participate in media moments, and these media moments are changing. The conversations tend to start technical, but then they turn into opportunities to think more broadly. And I actually want now to do more focus on the kinds of leadership and the kinds of practice that are necessary for dealing with the next year or two. And I want to go to John Atkinson and just ask him, are you seeing examples of leadership as you look around your immediate communities where you're thinking to yourself, yes, there's an example here that I'd love to be able to share with others, because this is the kind of leadership that's necessary for COVID world. John, please.
Yes, well, there are, and I think it gives great positivity to things. One of the things that, one of the conversations we were in earlier this week was with a university, and universities in the UK got quite heavily criticised in sort of September, October, as all the students came back. And in some respects, Julian, it's a little like your situation. You have a small market town, say, and suddenly you deposit 20,000 extra young people in who are all there. You know, they've all been locked up with mum and dad since March, and the last thing they want to do is turn up and be locked up when they arrive. They want to get to know each other, get out and begin, you know, the first stage of adult life. And what we've seen is where people take a serious and strategic long-term view on what's it going to take to run this place, to run this institution, to run my organization in a way that means life can go on, albeit slightly altered. They can make a really, really huge difference. So we saw the leadership there paying huge attention to the balance of incentive and a little bit of stick as well. Students were told, here's a set of rules. If you stick by them, we can do all sorts of things. If you want to break them, then we're going to suspend you. And if you get 0 marks because you were supposed to be doing something during that period, well, that's 0 marks, and that's your fault, not ours. So that there was this sort of balance in there of things, but they hired a huge marquee and set up a socially distanced bar, so that students didn't all go downtown into the one pub which was a known epicenter of some of the spread. They made sure the sports teams could function and under various sort of distancing rules. They made sure that people who were isolating got 2 hot meals a day. They couldn't do that for every diet, but they made sure that the voluntary groups and the support groups and the community groups around them could make sure that everyone was covered. So by getting themselves very organized, they've created an environment where not only is infection dropping and quite markedly so, but also no cases of transmission through the teaching program, and the teaching program has been able to carry on. And I think there's a lot of fear about how these things work, but what we saw there, David, was an example of some quite senior leaders connecting with their own organisation and their own capacity to say what we do, but also connecting more widely, connecting to the local director of public health, connecting to the national testing capacity, and saying, how do I get my act in order, but how do I connect with everybody else to make sure it works? And where they've done that, it really worked well.
John, thank you very much indeed. From fear and uncertainty to confidence and effectiveness with exceptional results. And the description is that there was an underpinning social contract between the university leaders and the student body, well executed through regular dialogue with the student body. There was a high level of organization, so people knew what to expect. Support groups were brought in, and really fine stuff has happened. And the people concerned are thinking, wow, we've done it. It just feels good, doesn't it, John? Very good.
Yeah, it did. And I think that social contract is important. The basis was not the threat. The basis was, we will look after you, and we will make a degree here worth what it always was, and we'll want you to have fun. But there was the underlying bit, this is a contract between us. We need you to play your part too.
So there are some of you who are involved in training programs. There are some of you working in organizations. There are some of you working with organizations. And Sarah Phillips, by the way, if I call on you, you don't have to give living, vibrant examples. We, just to full disclosure, in our planning meeting just before this briefing, I did ask Julian and John to be ready. I asked others whether they wanted to. Some said yes, some said no. So this was prepared. And therefore, I'm inviting you just simply not to engage, not necessarily with examples, but you may have questions or comments. While you're thinking, I would just like to say one thing. Joe Nichols asked, does it matter whether you mix a variety of vaccines in a particular population, or can you juggle them all up? My understanding, Joe, is not only that you can, but that it is anticipated that different vaccines will turn out to be suitable for different sections of the population. Some will have a particular utility for older people. For example, the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine that's just finished phase 2 trials is thought to be really remarkably effective in the older population. And so we expect a bit of juggling, but there's going to have to be very, very careful recording, because you need 2 doses of these vaccines for them to be potent. You may need a booster dose, and so people will have to keep some kind of record. I can foresee a certain amount of complexity, and I think it's a very good point. So, Joe, I've got your question here in Catherine's neat writing, and I'll hold on to that. And when I next have one of my not very often conversations with people in the vaccine team in WHO, I'll ask that. If you hear any point of view on the disadvantages or advantages of mix and match, please let me know. Rhiannon's asked Rhiannon Osborne, hello and welcome to you. I hope you're well. You said, what's the thoughts on the best way to get companies to share the intellectual property and know-how needed? Rhiannon, do you want to say a couple of words about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the really key questions with these vaccines, I think there's 2 issues, right? So one is the limitation on production capacity. Yeah. If you only have one company who can and knows how to produce the vaccine, a lot of these vaccines are about like the very specific details of how you make them, then you limit how much you can produce globally. And secondly, if you only have one company producing it, that tends to massively inflate the price. And I guess the third problem with most of these vaccines is that most of the current global production capacity has already been pre-ordered by rich countries. So with all of that picture, well, personally, from my experience in the field, what we really need is for like mass sharing of the know-how to increase production capacity and reduce the price. I'm quite a big fan of CTAP. I'm talking to Erica quite a bit from CTAP as well, because I think whilst COVAX is really good, as far as I know, it's not tackling any of those issues. It's coming at the distribution end. So it's like when we do have vaccine doses available, we buy them and we pool the risk, and then we help to distribute them in an equitable way between countries.
Right.
But as far as I know, it doesn't tackle the sharing of the know-how and the reducing the price earlier on. So I wanted to get your thoughts on those two.
I can just give you a couple of quick facts, and then I defer to others. Costa Rica, right in May, was the country that pushed very, very strongly for the intellectual property on all vaccines and indeed other aspects of COVID to be shared. And there was quite a big group of phalanx of countries came in behind Costa Rica, and it's certainly there. The resolution was presented at the World Health Assembly in May. It then got hauled into the omnibus resolution then. Not all countries supported it. There were what they call reserves on that particular paragraph. I don't think it's useful for me to say at the moment which countries didn't support it. But
it's all right, I know which ones they were.
Surprised. So I think that that's there, and gosh, I think most of us from an absolute value-driven point of view would say this is surely right. But then there is the other side that says, well, if you are a research-based pharmaceutical industry, you need to be able to sell, to keep your intellectual property and sell your vaccines at these high prices. So I accept all that really, really, really important. And I note your questions about COVAX, which you say does not deal with this problem of the IP and tech transfer. All I do know that Moderna team did tell me that they are ready to license their technology to others. And so I understand 10 Moderna vaccine production lines running around the world. And some of those are in what we would call developing countries, but that still doesn't solve the problem you've identified, does it?
Yeah, so I've heard from like other sources that their tech transfer office is like at capacity. So it sounds like they are trying to do lots of tech transfer. But yeah, no, I just think it's a really, really key kind of discussion to have, especially because lots of the arguments are about the limit we have on production capacity. And if everybody knows how to do it, we have much higher production capacity. And it doesn't stop people from making money, it stops people from having a monopoly, which I think is the thing that's quite dangerous.
Yeah, and so I look forward, when you've finished this part of your education, to you becoming deeply steeped in these debates, which are just constant and have certainly been going on all the time I've been in public health. And there's some movement. You know, we did a lot of stuff with the World Trade Organization on parallel imports and emergency use licensing and so on, but it's still a long way to go. I'm not going to make any more comments about it, but just to say thank you for raising the point about who will own the intellectual property on all these things, because it is a hot issue and presumably will continue to get hotter. Thanks again, Rhiannon. Lovely. So I was promising to come to Sarah, and I will, and then after Sarah to Chris, because we'd like now to think a bit more about this. So would you, Sarah, like to start on just thinking about this sharing of examples of COVID world? Sarah.
Hi, thank you. I just really wanted to hear from everybody, really, and thanks for the comments and what have you. Probably should put something on the LinkedIn. But I think it's confusing in the UK. So I've been at home here, but I can't keep carrying on like this because I need to bring my team back because I can't physically do everything, and they need support to do that. So managed to find this place that's like a glass bubble. So it allows me to barrier off everybody. And we actually first got somebody back this week, and she was in one side of the glass and I was the other. It's still hard. And it's still, you're thinking, is this still right? Is this okay? We had ventilation and all that sort of stuff. But I'm working with clinicians, so they're confused with me because they're thinking, well, just come in. We just put a mask on, because they're working together all the time. And when I'm teaching people online, some of them are clinicians. So I'm going into, they're all individuals because the way Zoom works, but I'll be going into, say, a hospice or something. And it's that initial, we have to do a little bit of work with, well, why aren't you just here? It's much easier. Just come in and show me. It's kind of irritation. So it's that thing. And then before lockdown again, so lockdown 2, people are calling it. So before the restrictions came in, I was talking to the manager of the business centre at the university and talking about how what could we do, you know, and stuff, because I need some rooms open and stuff. Is it safe? Is it not safe? And we need to talk about it and understand it and things and see. And they're so secure. They've done so much brilliant work there. But now I'm thinking, actually, I don't think it is right to be opening those rooms at all. But then I'm getting pulls from healthcare or service. And then you see hotels saying, oh, just come on and have a weekend. And you think, what's that? That's crazy. So I don't know, that's where I'm at. So it's I'm trying to really think, I'm trying to apply lots of things I've learned here and other places and move forward safely in a way that works, and I don't have to close my business of 13 years.
Sarah, thank you for squaring with us on this. I've been talking to a number of people about how individuals with different anxieties about the risks they face actually establish some notion of being in equal risk environments. So, for example, if you are wanting to go into a different environment, how can you make sure that that new environment has the same risk avoidance that you need in your domestic space where you are now? And there's still obviously work to be done, but my own view is that this will require the development of standards, so that instead of you having to negotiate individually with different people in your client hospital units and discuss it through, that there will almost be a rating number given to the level of protection that you can expect in a different place. That's some form of standardization. We believe, that's me and the colleagues I'm working with mostly in the WHO end, we believe that's going to be necessary. For example, how are you going to be able to encourage people to come to a hotel and stay in your hotel if you can't give them an assessment of the care that you're taking to avoid COVID risk? Answer, it can only be done through some form of certification. How can you, when you are trying to organize travel between one place and another place, by air or by vehicle or any other means, how can you decide whether it's okay for people to go from place to place without some form of assessment of the degree to which they're reducing risk? Answer, we believe that this is going to become necessary. It's just not there yet. And one of the reasons, Sarah, is there's still a few uncertainties about what does represent high levels of safety, but I think we will get in that direction. And I would be very happy to continue talking with you about ways of doing so. Please come back. If what I've said makes sense to you, just give a quick a nod now. If I've misunderstood what you were saying, please indicate.
That's really helpful, thank you, because it is a confusing place. And I've felt that for a while. We almost need AA star rating, but for COVID. Yeah. So it's the same sort of stuff. So you know that you're going to a 5-star or a 4-star or 3-star, and that's your choice. So yeah, that's in tune with what I'm doing. It's just, you know, I just want it to arrive quickly to make it easier. Thank you. And I'm quite, you know, I'm happy to work with that, but I don't want all these discussions in, and I think, gosh, then people will end up going into areas and bringing virus into
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. It's just, it gets messy, doesn't it? So hopefully it won't be too long before we've got that sort of way of working.
Totally right. And just to say that really this is urgent. Everything I hear is that the hospitality industry, if it's going to survive, has to develop some kind of star rating. And I know there's experiments going on, but I need to just do a bit more checking to see where they stand. So Sarah, I feel now inspired to move on that. Thank you very much indeed. And others, yeah, thank you very much. I see stuff coming in. Chris Shipton, you had an example, and nothing gives me greater pleasure than turning to you and say, come in, because we benefit so much from your brilliant diagrams, which I find are often in LinkedIn postings and other such things. So Chris, here you go.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I was just thinking about, you know, I think like everyone, if you go and meet somebody these days, they've all got their COVID stories, and, you know, it's a little bit like war stories or something like that. And, you know, I think like my one isn't actually about sort of health per se. It's about business, because, you know, in March, my business was effectively vaporized because, you know, it relies on going to meetings, and the symptom of COVID is no more meetings.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I read a really great article by somebody I used to work with who set their business up in the 2008 financial crisis. And I read this in March and I thought, well, you know, it's sort of analogous situation. And, you know, one of his prime bits of advice was basically, you know, take your business model and chuck it in the bin, because, you know, it's over. We're in a completely new environment. You have to do your business model all over again. And, you know, I think it's really interesting that the message from, I don't know, the UK government has always been, you know, this will be over by June, or this will be over by Christmas. Just hold fast and then everything will revert to normal. And I think, you know, maybe that's something to do with an ideological point of view. But I think actually it's a difficult political decision to turn around to your entire population and say, right, everyone, chuck your business models in the bin, start again. Because that doesn't really convey a message of hope initially or anything like that. But the reality of the situation is a lot of businesses in the UK didn't do that. And they've clung on, and it's getting worse and worse for them.
Right.
And they actually need to stand back and look at this COVID world as it is, let alone without any guidance. And if they do that, that's one of their paths out of this crisis, whether it's hospitality, events, or anything else. But not many people have the skills or support to do that.
Well, skills and courage, Chris. I was just thinking what you described, what you did, it was courage, but forced really out of necessity. But I
Well, it was the survival, was it really? That's what it was.
survived.
It's this or nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's a really nice challenge. Who else has got stories of having to do things out of necessity? One or two of you have got your videos on, and I'm always tempted when videos are on just to dive in and say, well, what have you got to say? So let's come. Vicky Doyle, courage out of necessity. Have you seen examples in Liverpool or in your work with Nazim or other creatives of really amazing experimentation and innovation for the COVID world?
Yeah, maybe a couple of examples actually. I've been working on a research program in Kenya and reflecting on how we've had to change the model of working there. And in many ways, there's been a lot of very positives that come out of that, because our local collaborators have really had to take the leadership role far more strongly than perhaps would have happened. Because, you know, we haven't been traveling out there. And so, and they've adapted how they work. We're working with community health workers and primary care workers who don't have laptops, who don't have broadband, who have to buy data. They can't afford to do online training. So everything's been done by WhatsApp. You know, they've been supported and supervised through WhatsApp groups. And so you're getting very strong kind of cohesion between those workers through these WhatsApp chats. And then we meet on a weekly basis and have weekly updates, which is probably more than we would have done before. So there's been a lot of kind of support and working together, but a different way of working. So it has been very positive. We were meant to be going out there actually next month, But again, because COVID was going down, but now it looks like there's a second wave in Kenya. So now that has had to be postponed. And we're in very close contact with the county health management team the whole time, looking at how we might be able to support the next phase of training. But again, it's just been postponed again. And we're now looking again at how we can do this in a sort of online environment.
Right.
And then just maybe a reflection of working in Gambia. I actually did manage to get out there a couple of weeks ago, which was very exciting. And managed to do one of those things to go and hear some live music, which I haven't done for 9 months. So that was really wonderful. But the very first thing that happened is the lead singer of the band's, his first words were, God curse COVID. Right. And they're really struggling out there because they're just entered what would have been their tourist season. There are no tourists there whatsoever. And for many families in Gambia, the way they survive is on that 6-month tourist season, which is not happening at the moment. So, they're having to look at how to adapt. I think in terms of my work with Nazim, COVID actually has provided new opportunities for him, and his kind of career is flourishing at the moment because of sort of adapting and providing a bespoke service, which we would never have thought about 9 months ago. But I worry for countries like Gambia, which are small nations, so tend to get less support from the international donor community, and as to how they're going to adapt with it. I was, nearly all the hotels are closed. They're precariously waiting to open, but I can't see that happening very soon at all. There are no charter flights from the UK. There should be 6 a week arriving. So that whole economy is really struggling at the moment, and very little support from government. So, I think, in some of these countries, it's really looking at how they can adapt. And I don't know what the solution is there yet. But I do think, that there are some positives coming up as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Vicky. And I would love it if I could connect you with some of the groups that are looking for ways in which tourism in poorer countries can survive despite all that's happened. I have a lot of conversation with people in Dominican Republic and Costa Rica who are in the same situation. So we need to look at that. Thank you, Vicky, as always, lovely. Now, Stephanie Okoyo is here. I'm always, when I see you, Stephanie, especially because I think you've got good internet today and I can see your smile underneath your headphones. Stephanie Okoyo is leading this group of young scientists in Kenya who are trying to encourage more young people to go into science. She herself being a science graduate, but also has been working really hard in Kenya, based in Nairobi, to try to help people in her country come through into the COVID world. Stephanie, if you felt like talking, I'd love it if you unmute and spoke, but you might just say the internet is not reliable enough.
David, I think today we are lucky. So I'm just going to share a little bit. I think for us at the moment, what we're looking at, we've had interesting communication with different science engagers, and it's just the discussion of, okay, how do we move from the face-to-face and physical interactions we've been having to virtual, and we're trying to now look at a hybrid learning, especially in rural areas, to see if we can use even projectors and mobile phones as a form of communicating and educating. And this was also inspired by your session last time on schools. Really helped with a few tips, but so far it's encouraging. It's not like the same state where I was the other time. It's working with what we have.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's lovely. It's lovely to stay connected with you all these months, and thank you for finding the time to join. Another colleague who's actually working in Kenya, but with a big focus on Somalia, is Joe Nichols. And Joe, you're there, I think. And I know you've been doing all sorts of experimentation, not all of it going quite exactly as you would like it to. What's your experiences been of COVID world?
Well, the thing that I'd put in the chat was related to some consultations we've been trying to do in Somalia. And Somalia is different to Kenya in that there's a really huge security aspect to it, and it's hard to move around physically, and to get things to people can be challenging as well. And we'd actually been trying to do some consultations on peace building priorities, but it involved outreach to a wide range of people. And normally that would have been possible to at least go to places to get rural engagement. But at the moment, because the facilities in Somalia are so limited, the number of international people present has been much reduced. And it's even harder for national people to move around because the flights aren't functioning. So we've done a lot of, put a lot of sort of alternative ways of doing business in place, including online consultations, including trying to get the text messages as a way to send things in. But I think one of the challenges with that is it tends to be quite biased towards richer urban males and less likely to include poorer rural females. Yeah. So the ability to have confidence in the breadth and the depth of the data is more of a challenge. Just very quickly on the idea for holidays and looking at how to rate hotels and things, I think that would be fantastic. And somewhere like Kenya, you can also envisage a way that you could almost create a safari bubble holiday for 2 weeks. People arrive and they're collected by people who have been in quarantine. And they can, some safaris charge huge amounts of money. So you might be able to create a system where you can do a AAA rating and say, this is your holiday. Once you get here, you're safe. But I would love to help think more about that.
Joe, if you come across any of that stuff, do let us know, because I'm trying to pull together examples of these sorts of experiments in different sectors. That'd be really helpful. I see that that's super useful. William N. and Barbara R. If Barbara, you're still on, and I've just lost you. Okay, I think Barbara's gone. William N., you're on. I'd love it if you could just speak to what you wrote in the chat.
It's just very quickly, David, you introduced this concept of ratings, of an apparatus in order to give comfort and enable us to move into a world where there's clarity, that people can make judgments and basically set a level of COVID safety. But that implies, firstly, it'll take time, but secondly, it implies a general recognition, a society-wide recognition that COVID is a long-term or permanent issue and not a temporary blip. That's a big political jump. The world has seen COVID as something that we are going to have to deal with. We thought it would be over by Easter, then by Christmas, but we still think of it as something that's temporary. Moving to thinking of it as something that's got to be lived with, and we've got to create the systems to enable us to live with it, is actually changes our politics.
Uh-huh. Thank you. That's yeah. I want us to go on thinking about that over the coming days and weeks, because as far as I'm concerned, William, I think the politics are going to have to change until, if our point number 2 in the list of 7 is going to have any meaning, it's about trust. That's going to require open communication about what we're really into, and that is going to change the political calculus, in my view. Please, let's have more on that. We won't be able to do that today, but please, let's have more in due course. Lovely. I wanted to invite, just add spikers. I just don't know whether you're and I'd go to Haruka as well. If your microphone works, add spikers, just a brief commentary on what you've heard today.
Yeah, David, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah. I see the sun is shining well in Geneva, and good morning to everybody. I worked with David in the time when I was in Bangladesh, And I just was reflecting, David, when we dealt with bird flu there, it was peanuts what we have now in our hands. And
Yes.
I want to underline once more, and also for the colleagues online this morning, the excellent talk you gave the other day for Hard Talk. Because mostly this journalist is trying to put people in the corner. But you kept the upper hand, and I was very proud that you, as a colleague of me in the UN, came forcefully how the role of the UN is so important these days. Number two, David, is I mentioned last time, you referred also to Indochina, to East Asia, and the good lessons from there. And I believe that if you can put in the coming weeks once a bit of time also, what we can learn, what happens in countries like Cambodia, Vietnam. Leolot, a colleague of mine, is just now in Vientiane, and there they have 0 case of COVID-19. So in that part of the world, apparently they have a kind of a grip on the situation, which can be useful for the rich world in Europe and in the US.
Thank you.
And lastly, I just to come back to William and William Nabarro, the same family. He puts, I think, the finger a little bit also on the economic pillar and the political pillar. And that's extremely important, David, because you know very well when we walked on the food security agenda, which still will continue in the future, that COVID-19 will have a huge impact also on the basic needs of many people in the world. And I believe that we can make somewhere a bridge between what we're discussing in this group and what is on the table for next year with the Food Summit 2021. So there are a few remarks, but still let's try to keep it up and learn from past experiences and do what you can, David, also. We are old hands in the UN family. We know that in some countries there are local consultative groups on different subjects, health, agriculture, food security, education, that we can mobilize those groups because they are close to the bilaterals, to the multilaterals, and we need everybody on board, especially under the leadership of WHO. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Ad. Just to say that this idea of harvesting more really good experiences from around the world, but particularly from East Asia, is really important. And so it's really beautiful to give the last word, if she wants it, to our friend Haruko. She might not want it, but the reality is that our friends in Japan are just doing some absolutely miraculous stuff. Even though the COVID spikes are there, even though in some cities in Japan there are big challenges, the country's moving on nicely. Haruko, how does it look from Tokyo?
Well, first of all, sorry for being very quiet participant of this briefing. So I'm too shy. Well, as you said, we have another spike of COVID-19, especially in Tokyo, which is my hometown, and I'm living in Tokyo. But it seems like generally Japanese people and the government have become looking at longer term.
Yeah.
And yeah, how to live together with the virus. And well, the government has decided to continue encouraging the economy, even this time with the third surge, and trying to encourage people to follow the thorough preventive measures. Yeah, which is very good, but it's still like an experiment, large-scale experiment in Japan. Now we need to also think about 2021 Olympic Games. We need to prepare for that. And on the other hand, we have a huge surge of suicides. Yeah, it's another problem during this pandemic. I think before the pandemic, we have a decline of suicide case, but because of the stay home strategies and so on, the stress under this condition made a lot of people stressed and selected to end their life by themselves. So yeah, we even though the situation, to compare to the European countries and US, the situation seems like better, but we have a lot of problems. Well,
Haruka, thank you so much. I know you're shy, and it's a real delight to us that you join and you stay together. Ever since we met each other when we were in Liverpool together, and I'm glad that you keep the connection. And I know that there's a little bit of Liverpool energy in the group, which is great. I thought two things that you said that I want us to hold on to. One is that, yes, there's a real forward-looking approach by government and people, but there are some people who are finding it very, very stressful. And in your country, particularly young people, they may end up taking their lives because the stress is just too much. And it's a very disturbing phenomenon. I think all of us find it disturbing when that happens. And we've seen that the numbers have gone up. But secondly, your concept of a large-scale experiment. I want to go on thinking about that, because for me at least, if we can recognize that everything we're doing is an experiment in how systems have to evolve, and be quite open with each other about that. It's not an experiment that's nicely controlled with, in this tube we have something, in that tube we have something else. This is a life experiment. And I think that's a very beautiful way to describe what's happening, working it out for ourselves, making sense of it. Thank you very much, Haruka. Time's up. Twee, would you like to just come in and give us your survey result and Chris's thing? And I don't know if anybody else wants to just shout a last comment, please feel free to do so. I've not managed time very well, but over to Twee.
Thank you, David. So most people joining from Europe, great to see one from East Asian Pacific, given the time of day we are. Always really delighted to see we have, even in a small group like we have today, we have people joining from every age range. And then great to see most people optimistic and hopeful. 3 at the very happiest level, and no one in the bottom 3. So really good to see that. And to Vicky, thank you for sharing the link to Nazim's new song. I'll be promoting that after. Thank you. And Chris, I'm going to spotlight you now.
Come, Chris. Go on.
I've just done my sort of very rough approximation of how vaccines work diagram. So I hope that's not too insulting to the more technically minded.
I love the vaccine attacking the spikes.
I was talking to a friend of mine about, you know, what it's going to be like when this is all over. And I think that is one thing that I think we can all sort of think about is when this is all over, I think there will be a fundamental change in that everybody's going to be wanting to go to parties all the time a lot. I think we can look forward to non-stop festivals and parties continuously to make up for lost time. So I think we should all hold that in our heads.
Yeah. I love it. Non-stop partying. Looking forward to that. Chris.
The last remark, David. May I encourage everybody to look back if they have missed the discussion you had with Hard Talk, because it was excellent.
Thank you. If anybody has a way of accessing our second Hard Talk, which was broadcast 2 days ago, we don't seem to be able to access it here in Switzerland. So if anybody knows how to break through the walls, let us know. Thank you very much indeed, Ad. Yeah, lovely. And I want on that one just to say that Hard Talk that we did 2 days ago, somebody very, very kindly did a half-an-hour rehearsal with me beforehand. I don't normally do rehearsals before interviews, but the more I go into difficult interviews, the more I think doing a test run is incredibly helpful. So this is just me saying to you, to all of you, if you get chances to do practice interviews, practice this, practice that, it's probably quite useful. I'm reminded yet again that even though I do an awful lot of interviews, practicing sometimes is super helpful. And Twee often helps me with that. Thank you, Twee, for your constant wise advice. To everybody, I just say bye-bye. We are honored that you're with us and we want to stay close. And with that, I'm going to stop, but I just want to see who else is on, just to say bye-bye to them. Thank you. There they are, there they are, there they are. I have just found here my grandchild, Ren, my two grandsons. No, Isaac says, stop pushing me around. I want to go and do my own thing. Hello, Polly. And there is Otto. And Otto is so just, he just says, I'm going to just watch you all. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah. This is the one, this is, although I managed to go and be physically with